Clase, nosotros necesitamos hablar sobre el imperfecto. So here we go. The imperfect tense is used to say what someone used to do or describe how things used to be. It's used to discuss ongoing or habitual past actions, anything that was in progress and it was happening, or it used to be a habit of yours. So for example, this sentence here could be translated a number of different ways. It can be translated to say, Marta used to swim on the weekends. Marta would swim on the weekends. I have this one crossed out because I don't want you guys ever to say would, because that would actually be the conditional tense in the class. But I want you to know that some people may translate it that way. You might say Marta swam on the weekends or Marta was swimming. The imperfect can be translated these 4 different ways. One way to remember all the different uses of the imperfect is the saying, just do it. D-U-W-I-T, description in the past, to say what someone used to do or the way things used to be. This is the one I always want you to try first and use it as long as it makes sense. If it doesn't, you might need to say what someone was doing or what people were doing, or you might just use it to say what someone did. Internal feelings or emotions in the past, you will use the imperfect for, and if you're telling time in the past, you will use the imperfect. And it's important to pay attention to what the imperfect is used for, because you will have to choose between using the imperfect or the preterite, which are both used to discuss the past very soon. There are some common expressions that are used with the imperfect tense, and here they are, and let's talk about what they mean. De pequeño, or if it's for a girl, de pequeña, would be when little. De niño, or for a girl, de niña, as a child. Cuando era joven, pequeño, or un niño, when you have era in there, you actually have a verb now. It's a form of ser in the imperfect, so when I used to be young, little, or a child. A veces, sometimes or at times. Muchas veces, many times. Casi siempre or just siempre, almost always or just always. Todos, los, period of time, or todas, las, period of time, would equal every blank. So if you want to say every week, todas las semanas. Every month, todos los meses. Antes, before, entonces, then. Let me get rid of the rest of that black part. There we go. Entonces means then. So when you see these phrases, it will be a big clue to you that you will probably use the imperfect in that sentence. So now you should have a general idea of what the imperfect is used to talk about. Let's talk about how we conjugate a verb into the imperfect if we want to say those things. Here are your endings for AR verbs. So you take off the infinitive ending and add these endings. Here are your endings for both ER and IR verbs. Notice there are 6 accents in all of the first I's. I say first I because there's 2 in this one right here. And I always say that the imperfect is super user-friendly because there aren't any stem changers, there are not any irregular yos, and there are only 3 verbs that are irregular. So now if we look carefully at these sets of endings, we can say that there is always an accent on the first letter of the nosotros. So the first letter of the ending or the first letter of the irregulars, because of course if I was actually conjugating a verb into the imperfect, let's say that I was doing dar, then the nosotros would be dábamos, and of course I don't mean that an accent goes on the letter D. That wouldn't happen. I mean a first letter of the ending, so habamos, there's the accent on the first letter, or as you will see in a moment, the first letter of the irregulars. You don't have to write that sloppy stuff there. So let's look at the 3 irregulars. The 3 irregulars in the imperfect are ir, ser, and ver. Ir changes to different forms of iba. Notice there's the accent on the first letter. Ser changes to different forms of era, which also has an accent on the nosotros. And ver, while it is irregular, it's not totally irregular. The only thing that's special about it is if it were normal, I would take off the whole infinitive and only have the letter V in front of these endings. But as you can see, it keeps its E. So ir, ser, and ver are your three irregulars. The nosotros always has an accent on the first letter of the irregulars, or the first letter of the endings. And that is a summary of the basic uses of the imperfect and how to conjugate it. But we need to talk about how the imperfect is used in a tense called the past progressive. You may remember the present progressive, and that would be really awesome because it's basically the same thing. So the past progressive is used to say what someone was doing right then in a certain moment in the past. And you take a conjugated form of estar in the imperfect now as opposed to the present, plus the plus the present participle. So right here, I want you to fill in how to conjugate estar in the imperfect. I will look for that chart in your notes. And let's review again what a present participle is. You may remember, to form a present participle, you take off the infinitive ending, which would be the AR, ER, IR of a verb. And if it's an AR verb, you add ando. And if it's an ER, IR verb, you add iendo. But there's a star there because there are a few special rules to that, and hopefully you remember those as well. But if not, we'll be going through them. So let's do an example sentence. How about we were studying, and knowing that to say what someone was doing or what people were doing, use a conjugated form of estar in the imperfect plus the present participle of the verb. I would like you to write that sentence in Spanish using the past progressive in your notes. And let's talk about what this star means about the present participles. There are some special present participle rules. For ER and IR verbs with the vowel directly in front of their infinitive ending, you change the I in iendo to a Y, which would become yendo. So for example, leer, which has a vowel right there in front of the infinitive ending, the past participle for reading would be leyendo. Traer, which means to bring, since there's a vowel right before the ER ending, bringing would be trayendo. And another one we should know, oír, which means to hear. Take off the infinitive ending and add yendo, we would get oyendo, which would be hearing. So to form a present participle, we take off the AR and add ando, take off the ER, IR, and add iendo, unless there's a vowel right before the iendo and we need to change the I to a Y to make it yendo. There's another special thing to keep in mind with present participles. You don't have to rewrite the heading because you already have it written down. But rule number 2 is that if you have an IR verb that is a stem changer in the present tense, you will change it from E to I only or O to U only. So this does not include AR or ER verbs because they do not stem change in the present participle at all. And you have to remember that if you have an IR verb that used to stem change E to IE, now it's E to I only. And if you had a verb that stem changed O to UE, if you're putting it into the present participle, it'll be O to U only. So for example, here are some verbs that we should know from our yellow sheets. And if we were to change them into their gerund or present participle form, we would have to change them from E to I only or O to U only and get diciendo. Dormir, which was O to UE, now is going to have to be O to U only, and we get durmiendo. Pedir was already E to I, so pidiendo is not much of a stretch. Preferir, E to IE, which E do we change? Always the one closest to the infinitive ending, will now have to be E to I only. Servir was already E to I, so it's going to still be E to I only, but venir, which was E to IE, will have to be E to I only now, and you would get viniendo. Okay, to quickly sum up this lesson, the imperfect tense is one of our past tenses, and it's used to say what someone used to do or to discuss someone's habitual actions in the past, and it can be translated to say used to. That will be our primary. That's the one we're always going to use as long as it makes sense. Otherwise, it can be used to say Marta swam on the weekends, Marta ate pizza on the weekends, Marta went to the movies on the weekends, because that would be a habit. Or just the plain old imperfect can also be used to say Marta was swimming on the weekends, was eating pizza on the weekends, was going to the movies on the weekends. Here is a list of the things that the imperfect can be used to say. Here are phrases that the imperfect is commonly used with. There are more, but those are a few. The imperfect endings always have an accent on the first letter of the nosotros, first letter of the ending, or first letter of the irregulars, like in íbamos and éramos. And you use the imperfect to form the past progressive, to say what someone was doing right then. And most present participles are simply formed by taking off the infinitive ending and adding ando or yendo, but we have to be careful that if there's a vowel right before the er, ir endings, that we instead add yendo. And we have to remember that if you are turning an IR stem changer into a present participle, that you're going to have to change it from E to I or O to U only. So, knowing all of these things, in your notes I would like you to write down these practice sentences. First, write it down in Spanish, skip a line, write your Spanish translation using all of your knowledge about the imperfect and your vocab, skip another line, write the next sentence, and repeat that process. English sentence, skip a line, Spanish translation, skip a line, and then move on to the next one. And I look forward to seeing your completed notes and answering any questions you may have. Good job taking your imperfect notes, reviewing your imperfect notes, and your past progressives. Adios!